Hey fellas, Dan Brokos from the Lead Faucet Tactical. Out here filming another episode of Recoil Training Tune-Ups. Today we're going to talk about red dots, specifically red dot parallax, and these four things: line of sight, bore axis, trajectory, iron sights, height above bore, and cheek to stock, and how all these mitigate parallax. If you're not running red dot on your carbine, I suggest you should be. There's a huge advantage to iron sights, but a good set of iron sights come into play when shooting a red dot optic, and we're going to cover that. Line of sight, bore axis, and trajectory. Those are the three things you need to get a hit on any weapon system. And how does that play when we're talking about red dots on carbines? My trajectory is nothing more where I zero. My bore axis is my bore axis. If I pull up my bolt carrier group and look straight down my barrel, that is my bore axis. My line of sight is how I perceive my optic in the target, and slight head movements really affect my accuracy when shooting a red dot. For the most part, red dots are parallax free, and that's dead center of that glass. The problem with parallax and how these three comes into play is when I start moving my dot to the outer portion of my sight window. Iron sights. Why are we talking about iron sights when it comes to red dot? Well, it's been my pet peeve for a while. My iron sights on my carbines, especially my front, are always up. My rear is for backup. This optic goes down, I flip up my rear, I got iron sights. But how does this come into play with my line of sight and bore axis? I'm gonna tell you. A good cheek to stock is paramount right here. This is easy. I'm a right-handed shooter, I come up. But if I transition the weapon from my strong to support and shoot around a piece of cover, which we should be, as soon as I come down on this thing, a good example is this picture right here. I transition the weapon from my strong to support. And this is immediately what happened when I picked up a sight picture in that target down there. My circle and dot were in the far left of that window. My front sight was right here. You know why? I didn't have a proper cheek to stock. My buttstock was on the outer portion of my shoulder. My weapon was canted this way, but my red dot was still on the target. How do I line up my line of sight and bore axis? Very simple. Slight head adjustment, and I drop my red dot right on top of my front sight. Hey fellas, height above bore on my mounts. You can see this mount on this MRO right here. Most optic companies advertise them as small, medium, and large, depending on the height of the optic. You have to choose which one works best for you. If it's too short and it's really, really tight on your rail, you might not get a good cheek to stock and a line of sight bore axis on the target. If it's too high, you might be looking underneath it and you might not get a good line of sight and bore axis to the target. I can't give you an answer. It's really not based on the size of the person. You have to figure out what works best for you. Everybody has a different eyes, everybody has a different shooting position, but it is very important when it comes to parallax that you choose the right height above bore. And that has to do with the mounting system that your optic is on. All right, fellas, cheek to stock. It's a very basic fundamental of stance, getting a good cheek to stock every time we shoot. Unfortunately, we're gonna shoot in some awkward positions that's not gonna allow us to get a good cheek to stock. We're gonna cover that in a second. But if we have the opportunity to get a good cheek to stock right here, every single time I snap the weapon up, that red dot needs to be in the center of my optic. The problem lies if we don't have a good cheek to stock somewhere in here, like right now, that optic red dot is sitting in the upper portion of that window, and that's where we're gonna get parallax. So it's paramount we practice and get a good cheek to stock. It's pretty easy on our strong side. If I'm shooting behind cover and transition to my support side, it's the same thing. I'm using a piece of cover right here. As soon as I pop this up, I need to have a good cheek to stock. If I don't, and sometimes if my buttstock's on my outer portion of my shoulder, my weapon's gonna be canted like this, my red dot's gonna be on target, my front sight's gonna be over here. Slight head movement, I line my red dot on top of my front sight. So that front sight really helps us with a good cheek to stock. We should be looking through our front sight the entire time. All right, fellas, I covered the 4 things when it comes to red dots and parallax on a carbine. I have some drawings up here. This is our MOO, this is our front sight. This is our perfect sight picture, standing up, kneeling, whatever is in the prone on the target. This is very common to hop down in the prone, especially on our support side, or shoot around a piece of cover on our support side and have our red dot and the left portion of our window. And you can see it relevant to the front sight. Even though my dot could be on that target at distance, I'm not gonna get my hit, fellas. You know why? Line of sight bore axis have to be lined up. If it looks like this, my front sight is true to my bore axis. I line these up, I'm gonna get hits all day long. Far left, my weapon is canted a full 90 degrees. This is common when I hop down underneath the vehicle or over a wall and have to cant the weapon 90 degrees. My dot's gonna fall in the lower portion of that window. You see it referenced to my front sight. All I can do is slight head adjustment, put my dot on top of my front sight, I'll get my hits all day long. Again, mitigating parallax by using our front sight to line that. If I had no front sight right here, I couldn't reference it off anything. It's just a slight head movement. Here, we're canted 45 degrees. This is very common too. SBU prone underneath the vehicle, weapon slanted 45 degrees. My dot's gonna fall in the left portion of my sight window. My front sight's gonna be right here. You're gonna get your hits close up because this is center of that target, but at distance, I'm not gonna get my hits. Have to lollipop, as I call it, my red dot on my front sight post. So this should be the correct sight picture no matter which way you cant the weapon. And in unconventional positions, fellas, line of sight bore axis. We use iron sights. We don't have a good cheek to stock, and our height above bore comes into play no matter what position we shoot in. We'll see you next time.